Hey, how's it going? Figured it was time to make a video about this topic, my weight loss journey that led me to shedding 100 pounds. Well, about 100 pounds, with the margin of error leading heavily in the direction of more than 100. I'll go over that more in a second. For any new viewers to the channel, OMG hi! I do firearm related videos here, so there'll be footage of me shooting various guns in the background. If you're just here for the weight loss part, feel free to just listen to the audio. I've muted the background pew pew noises for your listening convenience. So, let's get into it. At my heaviest, I was somewhere between 266 or 269 pounds, but I never bothered to remember for certain or to write it down because, well, to put it plainly, it was embarrassing. The lowest weight I've seen on the scale, pretty recently actually, was 169.4 pounds. So taking the fact that I don't actually know for certain where I started, along with my current weight, and the fact that I supplement with creatine, which usually causes 2 to 5 pounds of water weight retention, I'm just saying I lost 100 pounds, with the margin of error leaning towards more than 100. I could definitely get a true 166 by cutting carbs, sodium, and creatine, but I don't see a need to. I'm happy where I'm at least when it comes to fat loss. My intention is to become buff as shit. My original goal weight was 200 pounds, with a stretch goal of 180, and I've surpassed both handily. I then set a super stretch goal of 166, but my body feels completely comfortable at 170. I'll go over more later about deciding exactly what you may want your goal weight to be. Naturally, during the weight loss process, I lost some muscle, but overall, by keeping a good protein intake and by lifting weights, my muscle loss was minimal. And just for a visual representation of my loss, here's me at not quite my heaviest, about 245 pounds, and here's me now at about 170. Pretty staggering difference, right? Not just the difference in buzzing my hair and shaving the pedo stash, but just damn. That's a lot of volume lost. And for what I believe is the only surviving evidence that was ever in the 260s, here's a video of me testing my draw speed at around that weight. Alrighty, so let's go into some background about myself and my weight. I'm 6 foot tall, technically 5 foot 11.6 inches, and currently 24 years old, about to turn 25. Here's a photo of me back in my senior year of high school when I was about 205 pounds. As you can see here, I was a crackhead and wore a damn medieval riveted chain shirt on my final day. It was a great time. 205 at my height is still overweight, but I carried it decently well, I think. My weight gain began in college, where during my first year, I had a pretty bad depressive episode. It wasn't severe enough to the point of self-harm or anything, but I had trouble getting motivated to do pretty much anything, and after my second semester, I dropped out. Combine this depression with the prepaid unlimited food available at my school's cafe, and the pounds started packing on extremely quickly. After just 5 months in college, I had gained 40 pounds. And when I dropped out in 2019, I was at the previously referenced 266 or 268 number, if memory serves. Not only did I gain a lot of weight, but I gained some bad habits as well. Firstly, I ate until I was full for pretty much every single meal. I felt as if I didn't take advantage of the unlimited food and eat until I was full, I would be basically throwing money away. Here's the thing that fucked with my head though. I overate mostly healthy foods, or at least foods that I perceive to be healthy. I would eat 2 massive spinach wraps with loads of lettuce and some meat and cheese. Overall decent foods for you minus the calorie density in cheese and the ultra processed meat, but looking back, each of those wraps had to be around 1,000 to 1,500 calories, and I would eat 2 every day just for lunch. I'd also get a small ice cream cone pretty frequently, which is fine in moderation, but is not great when you do that every single damn day. Honestly, if I had to guess, I was putting away like 5,000 calories per day. This is in combination with the fact that I didn't really exercise at all except to walk to class. Well, class and Dungeons & Dragons sessions, but that was like once a week. I was definitely eating a lot in high school, but I was also practicing like European swordsmanship and spearmanship, which was really fun, and is some really killer cardio when you're wearing 40 pounds of armor. So yeah, a little over 60 pounds gained in less than a year. Not good at all. I will mention though that at the start of the year, I don't think I was in the 260s, just the high 250s. I've been working security for a hot minute, and I walk a lot at work. Before counting calories, I would still eat enough to offset the exercise mostly, but still, over the course of a couple years, I did lose about 5 to 10 pounds, which is pretty decent. If you can't get steps in any other way, I would suggest getting a job where you're on your feet a lot. Thankfully, at my particular work site, I'm able to walk a shitload. But there are a lot of gate guards who don't get the opportunity to walk, so it's definitely not a security as a whole kind of thing. So, that's my background. Hopefully I had some useful context. Now, what motivated me to actually lose the weight? Well, part of it is certainly the wake-up call that were health issues that suddenly popped up a little over a year ago. In September 2023, I woke up one Friday at 0600 for my 12-hour shift, and I felt completely fucking terrible. My heart rate was through the roof, and despite just waking up, I felt like I'd been running a marathon. My heart rate was easily double my usual resting heart rate, and I was so dizzy I could barely stand up. To top off this shit Sunday, I had extreme nausea and stomach pain. Despite all of this, I still crawled my way into work because getting coverage at that point in time was extremely difficult. This was a stupid decision for many reasons, but particularly because I'm a hospital guard. Were I to be needed, I was not restraining shit. Apparently, I have a killer poker face because none of my coworkers noticed I had anything wrong with me at all. Eventually, after discussing with a couple people, I decided to use the blood pressure machine in the lobby, and my blood pressure was 174 systolic, 91 diastolic, with a resting heart rate of 80. That's not good. I managed to get through the day and schedule an appointment with my primary care for the next Monday. Keep in mind that this is on a Friday. Saturday rolls around, and I wake up feeling less bad than the morning before, but still pretty shitty. I go in, and progressively through the day feel worse and worse until near the end of my shift. The nursing supervisor took my blood pressure by hand and came out with 210 systolic and 110 diastolic. In her words, "You're jacked up, Mike." 210, 110 is like potential stroke at 23 levels of blood pressure, so I've heard. So I went ahead and checked into the emergency department, and the doctor told me that my sodium levels were fine, as well as pretty much everything else, and there appeared to be no cause. Monday rolls around, and my primary care says basically the same thing. I do have a family history of high blood pressure, and maybe it was mental? Who knows? But he put me on meds and said that I was hyperglycemic in regards to my A1C. Also, my blood work indicated that I may be pre-diabetic. I also have a family history of diabetes. Honestly, I think this sequence of events was my wake-up call that if I don't change, I'm going to have health issues for the rest of my life, which may not be that long. I think living past 60 is pretty badass, so I definitely wanted to change that. Alright, on to what I did to actually lose the weight. Over the next few months between September and New Year's, I made the conscious effort to eat a little bit less and to eat a little bit healthier. I already never drank soda, so I didn't need to make that big change, but I began eating slightly less. Instead of 4 packs of ramen for dinner, terrible for you I know, I would eat 3 and then eventually just 2. I started making smoothies with strawberries and milk, and then eventually halved the amount of milk, and then just used water. Just little changes here and there to reduce my calorie intake. And unsurprisingly, I experienced some weight loss. About 18 pounds over the course of 3 months, and I was down to 238 pounds in December 2023. This set off a light bulb in my head, and I decided to give counting calories a try. Counting calories is the single most important part of weight loss, at least for me. I set myself at a limit of 2,000 calories per day, and on the 8th of January 2024, I began the process. Now I will say, if you're a tall male that exercises a lot like I am, I would recommend starting a bit higher than I did. Depending on which TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, calculator you use, at 238 pounds I should have been eating between 2,900 and 3,200 calories per day to maintain weight. That includes an estimate of my activity level at the time. A deficit of between 500 and 1,000 calories a day is generally recommended, which correlates to 1 pound a week and 2 pounds a week lost respectively, since each pound of fat equals 3,500 calories. Naturally, as you lose fat, your TDEE will reduce, so you need to adjust your numbers at least every month. The exception to this is if you put on a lot of muscle during this time, but most people can't build much muscle while cutting this hard. So, if I, God forbid, ever have to do this again, I would take my TDEE each week and subtract 500 from it to get what I should be eating. This is for a few reasons. Primarily, I suffered a lot of plateauing, and starting higher gives you more room to move down, even if the weight loss is half the speed. Surprisingly, I didn't lose all that much muscle mass, which is another problem with cutting too many calories too quickly. I managed to keep most of my muscle mass due to actually paying attention to macros and beginning weight training a month or 2 after starting the diet. But back on track, eating a maximum of 2,000 calories a day, I began losing weight like a madman. Sometimes up to 4 pounds a week, which is potentially unhealthy if you don't keep a good protein intake and don't continue to work out. Here's a graph the website In-App Nutritionix generated for me. I only started using it in April, but I went back and input all my weights throughout the months. I'm not sponsored by them, but it's free and I like their app. February 1st, I was at 221.5. March 1st, I was at 210.3. April 1st, I was at 197.7. May 1st, I was at 189.9. June 1st, I was at 186. July 1st, 182. August 1st, 178.6. September 1st, 174.5. And October 1st, 170.3. And from there, I've just been maintaining. And with this weight loss, all, and I mean all, my health issues have disappeared. Maybe not just the weight loss, but that was certainly the biggest part of it. Combined with cardio and strength training, my blood pressure now sits at 115/60 rested, and my resting heart rate is down to about 50 beats per minute. Not only that, but I'm also no longer pre-diabetic. It's incredible how much the extra weight was sabotaging my health, but I guess it really shouldn't be a surprise. So, all in all, this method works wonderful for me, and despite what people pushing for fad diets will tell you, at the end of the day, the only thing that can get you to lose weight is a calorie deficit, regardless of how it's achieved. That's unfortunately just how it is on this bitch of an earth. There are exceptions such as hormonal issues or other medical problems, but for the overwhelming majority of people, it's just about the deficit. Regardless if you produce a deficit via diet, or exercise, or a mix of the two, the result will be the same if the numbers are the same. So that's my background and the too long didn't read version of what worked for me. Now I'm going to go into specifically what my experience was like with the diet and things I would do differently. So for the first few months of my 2,000 calorie a day diet, it went fantastic. Every day I would weigh myself in the morning after having used the restroom and only wearing my underwear, and I saw a slightly smaller number almost every day. Come February though, and the progress at least seemed to have slowed down. Even though if you look at my month-to-month weights, I was losing almost as fast. I went through what pretty much everyone goes through, which is frustration at the lack of perceived progress. This was due to me getting caught up in the day-to-day weigh-ins too much. Your weight can fluctuate wildly each morning, and I'll go over this in more detail later. Either way, the initial loss reduced my TDEE by a little bit, but not really all that much, maybe 50 to 100 calories per day. My impatient crackhead ass decided to compensate by cutting another 200 calories, bringing me to 1,800 a day. Sure enough, that worked, and my weight loss continued well until March rolled around, where it was slowing down just a little bit again. What did I do? Cut out another 200 calories a day, of course, bringing me down to 1,600 a day. It was at this point I began feeling weak during the day and just cold. Typing on a keyboard felt like I actually had to exert some effort instead of my normal, effortless, frantic typing. I also stopped bouncing my leg and other fidgeting motions. At this point, my body entered what is often erroneously called starvation mode. Some say your body will shut down and that you will lose all of your muscle if your body enters the state, but what really happens, at least to my understanding, is that your body limits NEAT activities. NEAT is an acronym for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It's a complicated, nerdy term for fidgeting and shit. When your body detects you aren't getting enough to eat, it will stop these non-essential movements to save energy. Sometimes up to 300 calories a day are burned through NEAT movements, so my deficit was definitely being moved backwards by going down to 1,600. At this point, I thought that my metabolism had slowed down, which is kinda true, but not in the way I thought it had. I decided around the middle of March I would start zigzag dieting. This is a form of high and low day dieting that alternates each day. The way I planned it, I would have a medium day for the 7th day in the week. So, instead of eating 1,600 calories a day, I would eat 1,400 and then 2,000 repeating, and then one day I would eat at 1,600. This brought my average calories per day from 1,600 to 1,685, but still accelerated weight loss again. I thought at the time that this was due to my metabolism not being able to catch up with me, which is false. Your metabolism usually takes between 48 hours and several weeks to adjust. What this actually did was reduce diet fatigue and reduced my accidental cheating and caused my NEAT activities to start again, at least on my high calorie days. In regards to the accidental cheating, when you're deep enough into a diet, you will subconsciously start eating more than you think. I would estimate 1 cup of rice when really it was 1.5, or that surely this burger patty weighs about 100 grams. Nope, 200. Most people start miscounting what they eat even without realizing it, so come April, I started 2 new habits. One was using the Nutritionix app to track everything, which I mentioned earlier. That app doesn't bullshit you on how many calories something has, and I started weighing almost everything I ate. Going back and inputting stuff into the app, turns out I was eating way more than I predicted, sometimes up to 500 more than I thought I was eating per day. Thankfully though, I was still losing due to my deficit being intense, but keeping myself accountable down to the gram of Greek yogurt helped a lot. I highly recommend you buy a food scale and weigh everything you put in your mouth if you notice progress slowing down. I know a lot of people will find this annoying and difficult to stick to, but my potentially autistic ass loves to organize data, so I've had no issues keeping to it for close to a year. Once May rolled around though, I needed a break. I had been dieting for about 16 weeks straight, and I had recently read online about diet breaks, also called maintenance breaks. So, I did a week where I ate about 2,500 calories per day, which was close to my maintenance, and oh my god, did it improve everything. I'll go into more detail about it in the section specifically about diet fatigue, but dude, it's so good. I gained a few pounds in water weight, but I felt rejuvenated and ready to continue on. After I came off the break, I upped my calories to 2,000 a day and got a little bit more relaxed with my limits. If I ate 2,200 in a day, who cares? I also started running once a week and lifting more regularly, so I believe that offset it a little bit. Still though, it definitely slowed down my weight loss to about a pound a week, but I didn't really mind, because of how much more sustainable that kind of deficit is. While my weight loss slowed, my muscle gains improved and I got a lot more toned. Not only was the paper towel effect at play, But your body is far more likely to add muscle, which is more metabolically active than fat, when it detects you're in a less severe deficit. This is why bodybuilders do cut and bulk cycles. During the bulk, they're able to put on more muscle mass than if they were just maintaining. And to explain the paper towel effect, the closer you get to your goal weight, the more noticeable your weight loss will become. Kind of like with a fresh roll of paper towels, you take one sheet off, not a whole lot of a difference. You take one sheet off when you're almost to the end, oh boy, that reduces the thickness a lot. So just because you don't see a lot of a difference in the mirror at first, keep to it. It'll get better. Anyways, back on track. During the final weeks of my diet, I would eat 2,000 calories 6 days a week and then 2,500 on Mondays when I have my most intense lifting session. And then, recently, on September 20th, I decided to finally call the diet complete. I came to this decision after taking a good, honest look at myself in the mirror, taking some photos, and realizing that I looked pretty damn good now. I'll go over what kept me from feeling like I had lost enough a little bit later, but at this point, I finally had the mental clarity to see that I not only looked normal, but athletic. If you told me a year and a half ago I would look athletic and be in good cardiovascular health, I would have told you that you were smoking nuclear scorpion venom and were clinically batshit insane. Yet, here we are. I upped my calories to 2,500 a day, or 17,500 a week, which according to my math should be in the ballpark of my maintenance calories based on how much I exercise, though I have had to increase it a few times due to gaining muscle and increasing my exercise. So, that's that. My plan for the foreseeable future is to keep a close eye on my weight week to week and adjust my calories to stay in the ballpark of 170 pounds while gaining muscle. Eventually I'll probably start doing cut and bulk cycles to get absolutely jacked more optimally. So that's my diet journey summarized. Now I'll go into more details about various parts of the diet and dieting in general, but I must first state that I'm not an accredited dietitian and nothing I say is medical advice. This is simply my experiences and what worked for me. If you need professional help, I would strongly suggest seeking it out. Alright, with that said, let's start with diet fatigue. Diet fatigue sucks ass, to put it plainly. It's a term for various negative effects you will eventually suffer from as a result of a prolonged calorie deficit. In my case, it took about 8 weeks of near flawless and consistent dieting for the first signs of diet fatigue to rear its head. Some people will begin feeling the effects sooner, some later, but for the first time I caught myself feeling the temptation to binge eat was about 8 weeks. Shortly after that, the way I felt hunger began to change. Before this point, and what most people experience, is a more painful hunger. Normally when you feel that twinge and pain in your stomach when you're very hungry, but at this point I began to feel weak and cold. Now it might sound less bad than pain, but for me I would rather feel hunger pains 24/7 than an hour of this kind of hunger. Maybe I just have a high tolerance for pain and other physical stimuli? I kept a great poker face while feeling like I was dying September of 23, and I do shots of room temperature Everclear for fun, so maybe that's it. I don't know though, dude. I fucking hate this type of hunger. For this reason, I'll separate feelings of hunger into hunger pains and hunger fatigue. Hunger pains are unpleasant, hunger fatigue is horrible. Now, in all transparency, the whole hunger fatigue thing could just be a symptom of your body reducing its NEAT, but it was a huge part of my dieting experience, so I figured it was worth going into detail about. What did I do to combat this hunger fatigue feeling? Well, unfortunately, besides eating, there's not a whole lot you can do. Chewing either sugar-free gum or ice cubes did help a little bit, potentially by giving my brain the illusion of eating, but it would only do so much. Also, keeping my hands warm helped with the feeling of being cold, but again, only so much. There was also a lot of psychological effects of diet fatigue, such as there were some days I would just be an asshole. I usually try to be a very polite and kind person, but many days I was far more snappy and rude than normal. I also became far more likely to binge eat the further into the diet I went, and I binge ate for the first time on March 31st, about 20 weeks into my diet. I'm genuinely surprised I went that long without succumbing. And what a wonderful segue into binge eating. I see binge eating as different than intentionally deciding to eat a little bit extra, or deciding to indulge in a piece of cake or something. Binge eating feels like your subconscious desire to survive takes over and you just begin vacuum cleaning up any food in your vicinity. What happened in that particular case is I had just gotten home from work, eating only about 1,800 calories for the day, which was my usual at the time. I walked into the kitchen and something snapped. I proceeded to eat another 1,300 calories worth of random stuff in the span of about 10 minutes before I snapped out of it. It was surreal, and I felt really bad about it in the moment, but in hindsight, it didn't do much damage to my progress. This was my first bout of binge eating, and I've had it happen a couple other times, but after going to maintenance, I have not felt the urge. To combat this urge, I would recommend having lots of low-calorie, nutritious foods at the ready, and your less nutritious, more calorie-dense foods out of sight. Binge eating 300 calories worth of vegetables is far preferable to binge eating 2,000 calories of junk food. Alright, just a few more topics I want to talk about. Just a couple tips to potentially help some people out while keeping this video as brief as possible. Firstly, eat as many whole foods as you can. When people talk about processed and ultra-processed foods, while the term ultra-processed is technically correct, these foods no longer resemble their original form whatsoever. I like the proposed alternate term, pre-digested food. Ultra-processed food items don't send the same signals to your brain telling it that you're eating, and you generally won't get as full eating ultra-processed shit as you would eating whole foods. That alone makes it so I don't recommend eating a lot of ultra-processed foods, particularly if you're dieting, but there are plenty of other reasons like the extreme palatability and chemical contents. I could go into it, but I'll just leave you with the advice to mostly eat whole foods. And my next tip is to try not to get caught up in the day-to-day weigh-ins. Your weight can fluctuate wildly day to day, mostly due to water retention, which can be dependent on your carbohydrate intake, sodium intake, creatine intake, how much weightlifting you do, and other factors. When I first started my diet, I used to get discouraged when I saw the scale go anywhere but down. But the reality is, taking your weight week by week or month by month is a far more accurate metric of your progress. I personally weigh myself every day in the morning after using the bathroom and wearing only underwear to get as close as possible to my true weight. That specific criteria for weighing yourself isn't super important. What is important is that it's consistent. So if you want to weigh yourself entirely naked, or wearing clothing, or after having eaten breakfast, as long as the criteria are consistent, then it'll still be useful for gauging your progress. After weighing myself, I then take the average for each week and compare them. This is just what works for me, and as long as the conditions under which you weigh yourself are consistent, many different strategies can work. Another option is weighing yourself just once a week, or maybe even once a month if that's what it takes to keep your mental game strong. Just stay determined. On the note of the weigh-ins though, I was astounded by how much sodium I was eating even when I switched to mostly whole foods. The recommended intake is around 1,500 and 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day, but I was eating somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000 depending on the day. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that unless you have certain underlying conditions, but you have to be aware that it will cause more water weight retention. This can be mitigated somewhat by being well hydrated, but it can only do so much. Now, you don't have to go as far as tracking every quarter teaspoon of salt or MSG you use in cooking, like I do, but at least be aware of how much sodium you're consuming. If you want a practical real-world example of just how much water weight sodium can cause you to retain, back in July I had a crab day with my family, and I estimated that I consumed about 15 to 20,000 milligrams of sodium. I stepped on the scale the next morning, and I was a whole 4 fucking pounds heavier. Now, I didn't panic because this was obviously a result of the sodium intake, but holy hell, I could see someone getting extremely panicked if they weren't aware of what was happening. So there you have it. How I lost the weight and some tips for any who want to embark on a similar journey. Just be warned, it's tough and you'll want to quit. But if you stick to it, it'll be one of the best decisions you make in your life. Now, I have a lot more to say about dieting, nutrition, and fitness, but I don't want this video to be 3 hours long. If enough people are interested, I may make a 4th fucking channel for health and fitness related videos. And a closing statement for my gun people. Remember that your rifle is only an extension of yourself. You are the true weapon. Take care of yourself and be the best you can be. See you later.